In the year 1873, it opened with confidence and ended in crisis. America, flush with post-war prosperity, had come to believe that its rise was unstoppable. Railroads stretched from coast to coast, banks lent money freely, and factories roared with ambition. Yet, beneath the glitter of success, speculation and corruption festered. When the financial bubble burst in the autumn of 1873, it sent shockwaves through the nation and the world. The panic of 1873 would ignite what historians call the Long Depression, a global economic downturn that lasted for years. As fortunes crumbled, so did faith in government and Reconstruction. It was the year America learned that prosperity built on greed is as fragile as glass. The first half of 1873 looked like a triumph. Factories in New England turned out textiles and tools at a record pace. Steel mills in Pennsylvania glowed with promise. Railroads backed by banks and foreign investors were the pride of the industrial age. President Ulysses S. Grant presided over an America that seemed invincible. Western expansion brought new towns, and immigration fed the labor force. Speculators boasted that wealth had no limit, but behind the optimism was a dangerous imbalance. Credit was easy, speculation rampant, and paper wealth exceeded real production. Grant sensed trouble, warning that speculation was the curse of the age. Few listened. The country was too busy counting its riches. In September of 1873, the illusion of endless prosperity was shattered. The powerful New York banking house of J. Cook and Company, which had financed major railroads, suddenly collapsed. Cook had overextended credit on speculative railroad bonds that no one wanted to buy. The news spread like wildfire. Banks failed, railroads halted construction, factories closed, and workers were laid off by the thousands. Wall Street froze. In 1 week, more than 5,000 businesses failed. Grant closed the New York Stock Exchange for 10 days, the first time in history. Panic turned to despair as wages fell and unemployment soared. Farmers lost land, investors lost savings, and ordinary families faced hunger. America's industrial dream had become a nightmare. The financial crisis of 1873 triggered what economists later called the Long Depression, lasting well into the 1880s. Prices plummeted, credit dried up, and joblessness spread like a disease. In cities, desperate men gathered in tramp meetings, begging for work or bread. Labor unrest rose sharply. Strikes flared in New York, St. Louis, and Chicago. Families pawned belongings or moved west in search of survival. The crisis also exposed the danger of unregulated capitalism. The same railroads that symbolized progress had been built on inflamed promises. The men who once toasted expansion now vanished from public life. Some ruined, others disgraced. The panic of 1873 was more than an economic crash. It was a moral reckoning for a nation drunk on success. President Grant faced his greatest test yet. Critics accused him of incompetence and favoritism towards wealthy bankers. Yet he resisted calls for inflation or reckless bailouts, believing that restoring the gold standard was the path to long-term stability. His restraint angered his restraint angered both farmers and industrial workers who wanted immediate relief. But Grant was determined to preserve the nation's financial integrity. Let no man deceive himself, he said. The way of extravagance leads only to ruin. His economic caution eventually steadied the markets, but politically it cost him dearly. The working poor saw him as indifferent, and reformers accused him of serving the rich. His reputation as the honest soldier president dimmed beneath the glare of economic despair. While banks crumbled in the North, Reconstruction faltered in the South. Federal troops still guarded polling places, but the nation's appetite for enforcing civil rights was fading fast. Economic hardship shifted public attention away from racial justice. Northern voters, now struggling to feed their own families, grew tired of funding Reconstruction governments. Democrats capitalized on the fatigue, calling for home rule in the South, code for restoring white control. The year 1873 marked the beginning of the end of Reconstruction. Black voters continued to fight for their rights, but federal protection was weakening. The flame of equality flickered, even as the Constitution still promised it. Even in crisis, the West beckoned. Thousands of jobless men packed wagons or boarded trains in search of land and opportunity. The government's Homestead Act still offered 160 acres to settlers willing to cultivate it, and despite the Depression, the dream of independence persisted. Yet the expansion came at a terrible cost for Native Americans. The federal government broke more treaties, and the military clashed with tribes resisting displacement. In 1873, fighting intensified in the Northwest as the Modoc War erupted in California and Oregon. Led by Captain Jack Kintwash, a small band of Modoc warriors held off U.S. troops for months in the lava fields of Northern California. They fought bravely, but were ultimately defeated. The war symbolized the tragedy of Western expansion, heroism on both sides, but justice for neither. In the industrial heartlands, workers bore the brunt of depression. Factories cut wages or closed entirely. Women and children joined the labor force to make ends meet. Labor unions, still in their infancy, began to organize more forcefully. The National Labor Union, though weakened, called for shorter workdays and better pay. Newspapers spoke of the labor question, a polite phrase for the growing divide between the rich and the working poor. Grant's administration responded cautiously, fearing strikes could turn into an insurrection. The seeds of future labor revolts, the kind that would shake the nation in the 1870s and 1880s, were being planted in the hardship of this year. Even amid despair, culture and faith offered solace. Churches opened soup kitchens and relief societies. Hymns like "It Is Well With My Soul" and "Nearer My God to Thee" filled the air with hope. Writers and artists turned suffering into reflection. Mark Twain continued to chronicle the absurdities of the Gilded Age with bringing wit. Painters of the Hudson River School captured landscapes untouched by industry, offering viewers a reminder of the beauty beyond commerce. Though hardship, Americans rediscovered old virtues: frugality, charity, endurance. It's in adversity the moral backbone of the nation was tested and in many hearts restored. The Panic of 1873 was not merely an American crisis. Financial markets across Europe, especially in Germany, Austria, and Britain, collapsed in sequence. Global trade slowed, unemployment soared, and political instability spread. Foreign observers were astonished that the American Republic, so recently triumphant in war, could so quickly fall into economic chaos. Yet many admired how Americans responded with rebuilding, not revolution. Grant's steady, if unspectacular leadership contrasted with Europe's turmoil. Despite deep pain democracy held, the United States remained an example of endurance under stress, a republic that bent but did not break. As 1873 comes to a close, the clamor of the Gilded Age gave way to silence. Construction halted, stock tickers stopped, and a kind of humility settled over the land. For many, the year was a reckoning. The war had freed the enslaved, but greed had enslaved the conscious. Americans realized that moral strength could not be measured in railroads or banknotes. True wealth, Grant reminded them, lay in character. From this painful year would emerge a tougher, wiser nation, one that would rebuild its economy and in time face the unfinished work of justice again. 1873 was the year America fell hard but refused to stay down. Well, we certainly had some flaws. The Panic of 1873 exposed greed, speculation, and inequality at the heart of the nation's prosperity. Reconstruction began to collapse under neglect. Government and business became too intertwined, and compassion for the poor waned in favor of cold economics. So, for resilience in crisis, honesty in leadership, and the hard lessons learned through the loss, but also for corruption, arrogance, and fading moral vision, America in 1873 earns a grade of C plus by consensus. You've got to be kidding me. What a terrible year. And these scholars give this a C plus. It's unbelievable. It was a humbling year when fortune gave way to faith. I give it a D, and that's generous. I can't believe anybody would say that that's above an average year. It was a disaster. So anyway, let's get into looking back into 1873. I see a nation that mistook wealth for wisdom and paid the price. The Panic of 1873 was not just a financial collapse, it was a spiritual one. But in that hardship, something honest returned. Families leaned on each other, communities gave what little they had, and faith once again became a refuge stronger than money. President Grant held the Union steady, not with brilliance, but with integrity. And though Reconstruction faltered, the dreams of equality did not die. It simply waited for a generation ready to fight for it again. The lesson of 1873 is timeless. When prosperity fails, character must endure. This is Larry Reidy. Thank you for joining me on this countdown to 250 as we continue this American journey, 1 year, one challenge, and one lesson at a time. Thanks for listening. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And I will talk to you on the next podcast.